Godspeed. In the Bhagavad Gita, Mad Bhaktim Labhate Param, here Lord Krishna states that the Brahma Bhuta Anandamaya stage is complete only when there is an exchange of love between the Supreme and the subordinate living entities. Unless one comes to this Anandamaya stage, his breathing is like the breathing of a bellows in a blacksmith's shop. His duration of life is like that of a tree, and he is no better than the lower animals like the camels, hawks, and dogs. So that's where we left the day. We continue. Undoubtedly, the eternal living entity cannot be annihilated at any point. But the lower pieces of life exist in a miserable condition, whereas one who is engaged in the devotional service of the Supreme Lord is situated in the pleasurable or anandamaya status of life. The different stages described above are all in relations with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although in all circumstances there exist both the Supreme Personality Godhead and the living entities, the difference is that the Supreme Personality Godhead always exists in the Anandamaya stage, whereas the subordinate living entity, because of their minute position as fragmental portion of the Supreme Lord, are prone to fall to the other stages of life. Although in all the stages, both the Supreme Lord and the living entity exist, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is always transcendental to our concept of life, whether we are in a bondage or in liberation. The whole cosmic manifestation becomes possible by the grace of Supreme Lord. It exists by the grace of the Supreme Lord, and when annihilated, it merges into the existence of the Supreme Lord. As such, the Supreme Lord is the supreme existence, the cause of all causes. Therefore, the conclusion is that without development of Krishna consciousness, one's life is simply a waste of time. Very well. For those who are very materialistic and cannot understand the situation of the spiritual world, the abode of Krishna, great sages have recommended the yogic process whereby one gradually rises from meditation on the abdomen, which is called Muladhara or Manipurka meditation. Muladhara and Manipurka are technical terms which refer to the intestine within the abdomen. Grossly materialistic persons think that economic development is of foremost importance because they are under the impression that a living entity exists only by eating. Such grossly materialistic persons forget that although we may eat as much as we like, if the food is not digested, it produces the troubles of indigestion and acidity. Therefore, eating is not in itself the cause of the vital energy of life. Both digestion of the eatables, we have to take shelter of another superior energy, which is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita as Vaivasvanamara, Vaishnavana. Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that he helps the digestion in the form of Vaishnavana. The Supreme Personality Godhead is all pervasive. Therefore, his presence in the stomach as Vaishnara is not extraordinary. Krishna is actually present everywhere. The Vaishnava therefore marks his body with temple of Vishnu. He first marks a tilak, temple on the abdomen, then on the chest and between the collarbones, then on the forehead, and gradually he marks the top of the head. The Brahma Randra, the 13 temples of tilak, mark on the body of a Vaishnava are known as follows. On the forehead is the temple of Lord Keshava. On the belly is the temple of Lord Narayana. On the chest is the temple of Madhava. And on the throat, between the two collarbones, is the temple of Lord Govinda. And on the right side of the waist is the temple of Lord Vishnu. On the right arm of the temple is Madhusudan. And on the right side of the collarbone, the temple of the Lord Trivikama. Similarly, on the left-hand side of the waist is the temple of Lord Vamandev. On the left arm, the temple of Sridhar. And on the left side of the collarbone, the temple of Rishikesh. On the upper back, the temple called Padmanabha. And on the lower back, the temple called Damodar. On the top of the head is the temple called Vasudeva. This is the process of meditation on the Lord's situation in the different parts of the body. But for those who are not Vaishnavas, great sages recommend meditation on the bodily concept of life. Meditation on the intestines, on the heart, on the throat, on the eyebrows, on the forehead, and then on the top of the head. Some of the sages in the disciplic succession from the great saint Aruna meditate on the heart because the super soul stays within the heart along with the living entity. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 15th chapter, wherein the Lord states, I am situated in everyone's heart. As part of the devotional service, Vaishnavas protect the body for the service of the Lord. But those who are gross materialistic accept the body as the soul. They worship the body by yogic process of meditation on different bodily parts such as Manipuraka, Dahara, and Hridaya, gradually rising to the Brahma Randra on the top of the head. The first class yogi who has attained perfection in the practice of the yoga system ultimately passes through the Brahma Randra or to any one of the planet in either the material or spiritual worlds. How a yogi can transfer himself to another planet is vividly described in the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. In this regard, Shukadeva Goswami has recommended that the beginner worship the Virat Purusha, the gigantic universal form of the Lord. One who cannot believe that the Lord can be worshipped with equal success in the deity or Arsha form, or who cannot concentrate on this form, is advised to worship the universal form of the Lord. The lower part of the universe is considered the feet and the legs of the Lord's universal form. The middle part of the universe is considered the navel or abdomen of the Lord. The upper planetary systems such as Janaloka and Maharloka are the heart of the Lord. And the topmost planetary system, Brahmaloka, is considered the top of the Lord's head. So there are different processes recommended by great sages according to the position of the worshipper. But the ultimate aim of all meditational yogic process is to go back home, back to Godhead. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, anyone who reaches the highest planet, the abode of Krishna, or even the Vaikuntha planet, never has to come down again to this miserable material condition of life. Some devotees, they always ask that, we were in the spiritual world, but we fall down. So, what is the guarantee that when we go back, we will not fall down? So, here Krishna is ascertaining that you will never come back. The Vedic recommendation, therefore, is that one make the lotus feet of Vishnu the target of all one's effort. Tad Vishnu Paramam Padam. The Vishnu planets or Vishnu Loka are situated above the material planets. These Vaikuntha planets are known as Sanatan Dham, and they are eternal. They are never annihilated, not even by the annihilation of this material world. The conclusion is that if a human being does not fulfill the mission of his life by worshipping the Supreme Lord and does not go back home, back to Godhead, it is to be understood that he is breathing just like a blacksmith's bellows, living just like a tree, eating just like a camel, and having sex just like the dogs and hogs. Thus, he has been frustrated in fulfilling the specific purpose of human life. The next prayer of the personified Vedas to the Lord concerns his entering into different species of life. It is stated in the Bhagavad Gita, 14th chapter, that in every species, the form of life, the spiritual part and parcel of the Supreme Lord is present. The Lord himself claims in the Gita that he is the seed-giving father of all forms and species, who therefore must all be considered sons of the God. The entrance of the Supreme Lord into everyone's heart as Paramatma sometimes bewilder the impersonalist into equating the living entities with the Supreme Lord. They think both the Supreme Lord and the individual soul entered into the various bodies. So where is the distinction? Why should individual soul worship the Paramatma or Super Soul? According to them, the Super Soul and the individual soul are on the same level. They are one, without any difference between them. There is a difference, however, between the Super Soul and the individual soul. And this is explained in the Bhagavad Gita 15th chapter, wherein the Lord says that although he is situated with the living entity in the same body, he is superior. He is dictating or giving intelligence to the individual soul from within. It is clearly stated in the Bhagavad Gita that the Lord gave intelligence to the individual soul and that both memory and forgetfulness are due to the influence of the Super Soul. No one can act independently of the sanction of the Super Soul. The individual soul acts according to his past karma, reminded by the Lord. The nature of the individual soul is forgetfulness, but the presence of the Lord within the heart reminds him of what he wanted to do in his past life. The intelligence of the individual soul is exhibited like a fire in the wood. Although fire is always fire, it is exhibited in a size proportionate to the size of the wood. Similarly, although the individual soul is qualitatively one with the Supreme Lord, he exhibits himself according to the limitations of his present body. But the Supreme Lord or the Super Soul is unlimited. He is said to be Ekaras. Eka means one and Ras means mellow. The transcendental position of the Supreme Lord is that of eternity, bliss, and full knowledge. His position of Ekarasa does not change in the slightest when he becomes a witness and advisor to the individual soul in each individual body. But the individual soul, from Lord Brahma down to the end, exhibit his spiritual potency according to his present body. The demigods are in the same category with the individual soul in the bodies of a human being or in the bodies of lower animals. Intelligent persons, therefore, do not worship different demigods who are simply infinitesimal representative of Krishna manifest in conditioned body. The individual soul can exhibit his power only in proportion to the shape and constitution of the body. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, however, can exhibit his full potency in any shape or form without any change. The Mayavadi philosopher thesis that God and the individual soul are one and the same cannot be accepted because the individual soul has to develop his power according to the development of different types of bodies. The individual soul in the body of a baby cannot show the full power of a grown man, but the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, even when lying on the lap of his mother as a baby, could exhibit his full power by killing Putna and other demons who attacked him. Thus, the spiritual potency of the Supreme Personality Godhead is said to be Ekarash, or without change. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, therefore, is the only worshipable object, and that is perfectly known to persons who are uncontaminated by the modes of material nature. In other words, only the liberated soul can worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Less intelligent Mayavadis take to the worship of the demigods, thinking that the demigod and the Supreme Personality of Godhead are on the same level. So the personified Vedas continue to offer their obeisances and the prayer. Dear Lord, they prayed, after many, many births, those who have actually become wise take to the worship of your lotus feet in complete knowledge. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, wherein the Lord says that after many, many births, a great soul or Mahatma surrendered unto the Lord, knowing well that Vasudeva Krishna is the cause of all causes. Vedas continued, quote, as already explained, since the mind, intelligence, and senses have been given to us by God, when these instruments are actually purified, there is no alternative but to engage them all in the devotional service of the Lord. A living entity's entrapment in the different species of life is due to the misapplication of his mind, intelligence, and senses in material activities. Various kinds of bodies are awarded as the result of a living entity's actions, and they are created by the material nature according to the living entity's desire. Because a living entity desires and deserves a particular kind of body, it is given to him by the material nature under the order of the Supreme Lord. In Srimad Bhagavatam, third canto, it is explained that under the control of superior authority, a living entity is put within the semen of a male and injected into the womb of a particular female in order to develop a particular type of body. A living entity utilizes his senses, intelligence, mind, and so on in a specific way of his own choosing and thus develop a particular type of body within which he becomes engaged. In this way, the living entity becomes situated in different species of life, either in the demigod, human, or animal body, according to different situations and circumstances. It is explained in the Vedic literature that the living entities entrapped in different species of life are part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. The Mayavadi philosopher mistakes the living entity for Paramatma, who is actually sitting with the living entity as a friend. Because the Paramatma, the localized aspect of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the individual living entity are both within the body, a misunderstanding sometimes takes place that there is no difference between the two. But there is a definite difference between the individual soul and the super soul, and it is explained in the Varaha Purana as follows. The Supreme Lord has two kinds of parts and parcels. The living entity is called Vibhinamsa and the Paramatma, or the plenary expansion of the Supreme Lord is called Swamsa. The Swamsa plenary expansion of the Supreme Personality is as powerful as the Supreme Personality of Godhead Himself. There is not even the slightest difference between the potency of the Supreme Person and that of His plenary expansion as Paramatma. But the Vibhinamsa parts and parcel possess only a minute portion of the potency of the Lord. The Narada Pancharatra states that the living entities who are the marginal potency of the Supreme Lord are undoubtedly of the same quality of spiritual existence as the Lord Himself. But they are prone to be tinged with material qualities. Because the minute living entity is prone to be subjected to the influence of the material qualities, he is called Jiva. And sometimes the Supreme Personality of Godhead is also known as Shiva, the all-auspicious one. So the difference between Shiva and the Jiva is that all auspicious personality of Godhead is never affected by the material qualities, whereas the minute portion of the Supreme Personality Godhead are prone to be affected by the qualities of material nature. The super soul within the body of a particular living entity, being a plenary portion of the Lord, is worshipable by the individual living entity. Great sages have therefore concluded that the process of meditation is designed so that the individual living entity may concentrate his attention on the lotus feet of the super soul. That is real samadhi. The living entity cannot be liberated from material entanglement by his own effort. He must therefore take to the devotional service of the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord or the Supersoul within himself. Sridhar Swami, the great commentator on the Srimad Bhagavatam, has composed a nice verse in this regard, and the meaning of which is as follows. Quote, "My dear Lord, I am eternally a part of you, but I have been entrapped by the material potency, which are also an emanation from you. As the cause of all causes, you have entered my body as a super soul, and I have the prerogative of enjoying the supreme blissful life of knowledge along with you. Therefore, my dear Lord, please order me to render you loving service so that I can again be brought to my original position of transcendental bliss." Very nice prayer by the personified Vedas. Great personalities understand that a living entity entangled in this material world cannot be freed by his own efforts. With firm faith and devotion, such great personality engage themselves in rendering transcendental loving service to the Lord. That is the verdict of the personified Vedas. The personified Vedas continued, quote, "Dear Lord, it is very difficult to achieve perfect knowledge of the Absolute Truth. Your Lordship is so kind to the fallen souls that you appear in different incarnations and execute different activities. You appear even as a historical personality of this material world, and your pastimes are very nicely described in the Vedic literature. Such pastimes are as attractive as the ocean of transcendental bliss. People in general have a natural inclination to read narration in which ordinary jivas are glorified. But when they become attracted by the Vedic literatures, which delineate your eternal pastimes, they actually dip into the ocean of transcendental bliss. As fatigued man feels refreshed by dipping into a reservoir of water, so the conditioned souls who is very much disgusted with material activities become refreshed and forgets all the fatigue of the material activities simply by dipping into the transcendental ocean of your pastimes. And eventually emerges into the ocean of transcendental bliss. The most intelligent devotees, therefore, do not take any means of self-realization except devotional service and constant engagement in the 9 different processes of devotional life, especially hearing and chanting. When hearing and chanting about your transcendental pastimes, your devotees do not care even for the transcendental bliss derived from liberation or from merging into the existence of the Supreme. Such devotees are not interested even in so-called liberation, and they certainly have no interest in material activities for elevation to the heavenly planet for sense gratification. Pure devotees seek only the association of Paramhansa or great liberated devotees so that they can continuously hear and chant about your glories. For this purpose, the pure devotees are prepared to sacrifice all comforts of life, even giving up the material comfort of family life and so-called society, friendship, and love. Those who have tasted the nectar of devotion by relishing the transcendental vibration of chanting of your glories. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Do not care for any other spiritual bliss or for material comforts, which appear to the pure devotee as less important than the straw in the street. Haribol. So the personified Vedas continue. Quote, Dear Lord, when a person is able to purify his mind, senses, and intelligence by engaging himself in the devotional service in full Krishna consciousness, his mind becomes his friend. Otherwise, his mind is always his enemy. When the mind is engaged in the devotional service of the Lord, it becomes the intimate friend of the living entity because the mind can then think of the Supreme Lord always. Your Lordship is eternally dear to the living entity. So when the mind is engaged in thought of you, one immediately feels the great satisfaction for which he has been hankering life after life. When one's mind is thus fixed on the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality Godhead, one does not take to any kind of inferior worship or inferior process of self-realization. By attempting to worship a demigod or by taking to any other process of self-realization, the living entity becomes a victim of the cycle of birth and death. And no one can estimate how much the living entity is degraded by entering abnormal species of life such as cats and dogs. I think we should stop here. And I think we will continue tomorrow from where we have left. And if Krishna so desire, we'll see you tomorrow morning at 2 a.m. Central Standard Time. If not, then you can join at your convenient time. So looking forward for your kind association tomorrow morning. Yeah, it's about 5:25, 5:26 p.m. in India. And it's